Man, I love this excavator. It weighs 10,000 pounds and it follows me down the road like an obedient puppy. But what a nightmare it would be if it came off this trailer. That's why you've got to use transport chain. It's a particular grade. It's grade 70, I think, or 80. This is 5/16 is the size of the chain with proof-tested grab hooks on each end. It's 20 feet long. You can use it for holding down and pulling things out of the mud, right? But this is the chain, the type of chain that I use most often. This is a rigging chain. I've had two of these for 20 years and I lost them both in the last 6 months. So here's one of the two that I'm going to use to show you guys some of the tricks that you ought to know. One of the tricks with this chain and 3 or 4 of the tricks with this chain when you've got a project that just has to happen right now. Now here's a question. I like to do this because the hook doesn't come undone. But somebody tell me if this is a legal or just a judgment mistake, is that stake pocket as strong as that D-ring? Now there's a good reason to use the D-ring that I'll show you on the other side maybe, or maybe up front. But let me know what you think about doing that when you're holding down a piece of equipment. This is a time I like to use a D-ring, and I'll show you why. Hook wherever you want. If you've got way too much slack, you can reduce it like that, and then I've got to tighten that up. This is a binder. That's a Swede. I'm going to call him Oli. And I can do that because I'm 50% Swedish. The trick becomes guessing how much slack you need in order to be able to hook this thing up and tighten it up. Now that's probably too short. And that's probably almost too long. So here's why I use a D-ring on one side. Can you see that when you pass around, think of this as a pulley. When you pass around a bight through an anchor like that, if I drop back 1 link, I'm actually only losing half a link in distance. And if I shorten up 1 link, I'm only shortening half a link in distance. Can you see that? So now let me go up here and see if the distance between these two hooks is just right for the binder. That's pretty good. We're going to put Oli on here. Oh, that's too tight. And for now, that's just right. Too loose. Pretty tight. Let's see. See, that's too tight. I don't want to break something. So that's the advantage of going through a D-ring. I can lose not a whole link, I can lose a half a link, just like this. Take off Oli, cut a little slack. If I drop back 1 full link right here, I add a half a link in length. See, that's just right. You need to put enough tension on the chain to keep everything locked, but not so much that you're going to break something. And then when you have an extra bite, you can throw that around here just as little insurance to keep that handle from ever flopping open. You can never say too much about double and triple and quadruple checking your tie down your load. When this was tied down pretty tight, once I put the strain on the front, this tightened up enough that it's just not going anywhere either. But I'll check this again before I get on the open road. So I have here two older and awkward and slightly less desirable rigging chains. A rigging chain is different than a tow chain or a transport chain because it has one grab hook, that is, it grabs, and one slip hook or running hook that slides. Now I'm just going to show you the hook up here and then do it with the new chains just because they're so much nicer. But the idea is that you can make a choker out of a chain. See that? That slip hook lets you come up tight and, dependably. It squeezes as it lifts instead of just holding. But I'm going to do that with these new chains just because they're so nice. 1/4 inch is so nice. It's big enough to do work at proof tests like around, I think 3,200 pounds is a load strength, maybe 36. This has got the little safety keeper on there. That'll last for about 20 minutes probably. I put it down below the rib on that barrel just a little bit, and I throw the bite over here, or the bitter end, just so it doesn't run down the hill. Let me get the other one. All right, so this 1/4 inch chain is easier to work with than the 5/16. 12 feet long is long enough for a lot of things, short enough to be handy. It's kind of neither fish nor fowl. So at this point, see how much length I've got? I don't have to use every inch of this chain. This is one of the things that needs to be learned about using chains, that the hook enables you to lengthen and shorten at will. So I'm going to come around here and just grab that other side wherever I want. Look at that nice short hook. See what happens? It acts like a choker, not a chain. Now, you can choke a load with a regular chain, but it doesn't squeeze like that. You get some crushing loads along with the lifting loads. And that slip hook does not reduce the strength of the chain as much in a hard bind as a grab hook does. A grab hook leaves a chain at about 80% of its strength when it's pulling at a long angle. When you make a grab hook pull in a hard bind, it makes the chain weaker. But anyway, this is item 1 on rigging chains. I've got a couple other things to show you. Come on, baby. So you see this snarl of chain picking up 2 separate loads? This took me less than a minute, like no time. The fact is that when you've done this for a while, you begin to think of new ways to use both types of hooks, the grab hook, the slip hook, and once you understand the different ways that they function, you can understand different ways to use the chain. One of the mistakes people make when they're using the intelligence test that is a rigging chain is thinking that I got to use all 12 feet. Well, if you look, I've got the lift, 16 inches from the pipe and 28 inches from the anvil. And each of these chains is 144 inches long. Now you can't just tie a knot in the middle of a chain like you can like a sheep shank in a rope to take up length. But there are different ways to use the length and still not compromise the chain, increase the safety and security of your hold, and get the work done. So, Every case is different. I'm going to lower this and show you how you can use this even to grab a small diameter piece of pipe. But obviously, this is neither towing nor transporting. It's rigging. And anyhow, it's fun. You got to think about it. Let me unwrap this anvil and pick up a little piece of 5-inch diameter pipe, and we'll wrap this up. So in construction and in logging and in about anything else you want to do, sometimes you've got to pick up a long, small diameter object, and sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes you got to pull a fence post out of the ground. Sometimes maybe you got to raise a gin pole or raise the poles for a pole barn to drop down into holes. And so you're left with the question of, how do I attach to something that doesn't want to be attached? Back to our hero. And if you put, a couple wraps or more, and if you let the top wrap bind over the bottom wrap, which it wants to do anyhow, and if it's not that heavy, you can do a double wrap around your hook. See that? So this is nowhere near every miracle that can be worked with the rigging chain, but you get the idea. And you're smart enough to figure out the ways to use one of these things, a 10-footer or a 12-footer or an 8-footer, to solve a lot of the problems you encounter when you're trying to make stuff happen. So you get the idea. We've got lots of videos about these things. We've got a video on knots with rope. We've got a video on using mechanical advantage to get all kinds of work done. We've got the Essential Craftsman Academy, where we get together twice a month and talk about problems and solutions like this. You might enjoy that. You can see the link in the notes. But anyway, if you're a person who lives in a world where you got to make things happen right now and safely and not waste a bunch of moves, you need a rigging chain. In fact, you might need 2 or 3. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.